This is Elected, a podcast for women and our active accomplices in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara. I should get my own name right. And today my guest is Naomi Sayers. Before we get going, so in the spirit of reconciliation, it's important to share my personal commitment to learning the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence and oppression against Indigenous peoples. The land on which I live, work, and record from is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes on the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. So, Naomi, I am super excited to talk to you today because I admire you constantly on Twitter and online, as well as your co-counsel, who I don't believe is with you because I'm sure he would be making himself known, Charlie.
Yes.
Yes.
Who's a dog? We should.
Yes, I should point that out. It's not a human. Charlie is a dog.
Yes. Yeah. So thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to talk to you and meet you. So.
Well, let's get into it. So you are a badass in terms of everything that you do, like just generally. So you're a lawyer. You recently ran in the Ontario provincial election. And that doesn't even do you. You're an advocate. You're a feminist. You are so many things. And I think one to watch just like generally in Canadian politics, but obviously in the law scene as well. I'm not a lawyer, but the work that you do and the things that you take on are really powerful, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's a good high level summary of the work that I do. I have a heavy litigation practice, but I'm always looking to move back out west to work in-house. I love working in-house as legal counsel, whether in the legal department or a different department. So I'm in that process right now, just because I love out west. Like, it's always whatever city you go in, it's just like or community, it's very like everybody's, treats you like family, I find. Generally. Well,
I also was reading that it said you have spent obviously time in Alberta, and it said up north, but like, what does up north mean? Where?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't know if you know where Châté is.
No, I don't.
So that's it. Châté is formerly Assumption. So Assumption, Alberta. Assumption is a First Nation of the Demeanor First Nation, and it's near high level. So
okay.
Yeah, so really high up there. I lived and worked in Châté for a summer, and I fell in love with Alberta in that moment. And then I came back and I lived and worked in Sucker Creek First Nation, just mentoring Indigenous youth. So building their capacity to build leadership programs in their community and building leadership skills for them. So just by way of example, so the one community I work in, I won't say which one, but the one youth, you have your individuals in community who may outcast certain people, and he was one of those people, but he actually ended up becoming a youth mentor with the program that we worked in, and he ended up mentoring other youth in other communities, and he ended up going on to college. And I think that is one of the prime examples of the work that we were doing was encouraging these youth to continue on with their whatever they wanted to do, right? If he didn't want to go on to education, that's fine. Like if you wanted to just go straight to work, that's fine as well. But just having positive influences in their life. Because I remember one day I was sitting in the youth house and I was studying for an exam that I failed. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm studying. I failed an exam. I have to take this exam again if I don't take it. And it was during law school. And I said, if I don't take it, I'm going to fail out of law school. And he goes and he asked me how old I was. I said how old I was. And he goes, that's old. But he was, and I said, I went back to college when I was your age, and it's doable, and you won't be the oldest one, and there will be people there who are older. And I think, and he eventually did go back to college.
I was 29 when I graduated from university, with my undergrad.
Yeah.
which I also like, I had a lot of conversations internal, like in my own head about like, am I too old but like, I don't think you're ever too old. So that message obviously reached him. And
Yeah.
what is he doing now? Like if you can say generally.
I think he's back and working in the community, which is great. And
Yeah.
fun. That's what he wanted to do. And so that's great.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think there are so many opportunities like where maybe we just don't know it on a daily basis where we can actually, like small conversations or moments that we have with people can maybe be like the impact can be far greater than we comprehend.
Yeah, I had no idea that's what he was doing until somebody told me the next year. And
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, that's so sweet.
Well, if you move back to Alberta, you should go and visit him.
For sure. Absolutely.
I'm curious. So besides like the general friendliness of people in Alberta, what was one thing that surprised you about being here that maybe you didn't like kind of broke an expectation?
So a lot of people, obviously there's a stereotype that Alberta is very conservative. And I also lived in South Saskatchewan, which is also very similar, stereotype or whatever. But I found generally that I feel like people are open, people are inviting, and the smaller towns, you could definitely find people who are willing to help you. Obviously, every small town will have crappy people, but if you find your people, they will help you. And I feel like that was what made me feel welcome.
Well, come on back to Alberta. We would be very lucky to have you. Let's get into your most recent experience, which was running for office. So you'd been asked by someone to run as an Ontario Liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Submitted your nomination papers, and I think everything that they require, and then they sat on your stuff, and it's amazing how like you can get a sense of like how things are going based on the timeliness in which someone responds to a request. And ultimately you ended up running as an independent in Sault Ste. Marie. So you're definitely not the first woman to experience like on the vetting side of things. So like political parties need to get their act together. They need to realize that women are like, we are multifaceted. You are multifaceted. Like the days of having, where no one swears on the internet are like over, or the days of no one saying something that, can be taken out of context or controversial are over. In a sense, like I feel like political parties are maybe even like, they're riding high on the cancel culture bandwagon because they like literally want to cancel or, prevent anyone from becoming a problem. Right.
Yeah.
But it's actually, I see it as an opportunity. Like if something like that happens, and obviously it depends on the context of the case, but it's actually an opportunity for political parties to like lean into the idea that this isn't like depending on the situation. It's actually a strength of someone because like of lived experience or learning, like we need more women in politics. We need more Indigenous women in politics. We need more Black women in politics. Like we need more women in politics. And like women are like, we're people. So like, tell me, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what needs to happen? What needs to change with political parties?
Yeah. So the vetting process is, so I liken it to the same process as becoming a lawyer. So some of the questions that they ask are very similar to what I would disclose if I were to apply to another bar. So, and it was the same exact material that I had to disclose to the Law Society of Ontario and Alberta when I became licensed in both provinces. So it's very invasive and that's fine. That's okay. But I think, this checkbox approach to things. Like if you check yes, if the explanation isn't what they're looking for as to why you answered yes, it's almost like as if you're automatically out, right? And so that's the way systemic issues can present themselves, as just less nefarious than they actually are. And when I became a lawyer, exact same thing happened to me there. So because the questions are similar on the same form, so it's actually quite wild how similar they are. And when I became a lawyer, I said yes to some questions because obviously I have to say yes to those questions. But what ended up happening was the questions were overbroad, right? So it was over capturing some conduct, which if you review legislation and case law, probably shouldn't have been disclosed, right? Probably should have been more aligned with what legislation was saying. So just by way of example, so criminal records legislation, an absolute discharge, which is what I had when I was 18. When I applied to become a lawyer, I had to check yes, because it said, did you ever have an absolute discharge where you were found not guilty or whatever, or convicted? So yes, because there was no temporal limitation, meaning it didn't say within the past year or within the past 5 years, I had to say yes. But the criminal records legislation actually says within, like, policing agencies cannot disclose absolute discharges if it's been more than 1 year. And the legislation says I have to get ministerial approval for that disclosure. So when I applied to the Law Society, it was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, so I retained counsel, and counsel, whatever, represent my interests. But exact same thing in the parties, right? So like, it's let's just start with this form. Like, people often think, advocacy and improving, inclusion and diversity, it means, okay, let's just bring more people in. But actually it can just be as simple as, what is the process for assessing these nominations and applications? And where are we closing the doors too soon? And I think, these forms, because it's very similar, because I literally took my package that I gave to the Law Society and said, here you go. And that's how I applied so fast. Like if I was never under the good character investigation by the Law Society, which now I'm a lawyer, in 2 provinces. So I wouldn't have been able to meet that deadline.
Well, and I mean, you're a lawyer. And so obviously, I'm not a lawyer. So if I was in your shoes and had the same history as you, I would feel like and I think women already do this, we self-disqualify because like if you have any experience in politics, that, that some questions will be asked and you're going to be like, well, this happened. And so, I will never be able to run. And that's actually the opposite of like what we need. We don't need women to self-disqualify, and we don't need parties to disqualify people for things that require more than a checkbox answer.
Yeah, exactly. So when if you do disclose something, like it's very similar, like I was saying, you do provide explanation and you do provide additional context. You can, but the answer is probably should. And so I don't think we're probably talking to women enough about what kind of answers, what other sort of issues have arisen for other women, right? So
how do you answer? Maybe this is something that you and I do at a later date, is like how to fill out your nomination papers, common pitfalls and, things to watch out for.
Yeah, exactly. Because like they also have this large umbrella question at the end, like, what is there anything else that you have to disclose? And you're like, I don't know.
Like my whole life.
Yeah, because I don't want to be caught in a position where, as if I'm the one trying to hide information when I'm not.
It's basically, an open-ended catch-all. Where can we find something that you haven't disclosed that we can find out about you and you then disqualify you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. And I think that's where the conversation needs to be had first before we can say, okay, how do we get more women in politics aside from other barriers like money, time, family, support? Okay, like if they want to run under a party banner, how do we address those issues there? Because the other option is, you can run it as an independent and do what I did.
Yeah. And what was that experience like for you running as an independent?
It was, my initial goal was just get my name on the ballot because I actually didn't think my name was going to get on the ballot. So people often think that, it's super easy to get your name on the ballot and you just have to sign some papers and you're done, right? Absolutely not. So there are requirements that you need to meet. So one requirement is like get a CFO, and the CFO has to be somebody different from you. And this is another critique that I have, right? So like, what if somebody who is not a member of like a party, who's not being backed by a party, like I was able to raise some funds to cover some of my costs. And I get why they have the CFOs, right? You don't want people like taking advantage of money and whatnot. But those requirements are there because bigger parties have caused issues for us, right? So there's that auditing and monitoring that has to happen. And that may make sense for parties that have like hundreds of thousands of dollars coming and going, right? But for somebody who may only have like $1,000 or $2,000 that come in, like that's a burden right there.
It is a barrier. It's a definite barrier.
So I had a hard time finding a CFO. And so the next step was, if I can find a CFO, I will get the signatures that I need. And then that was also another issue, was getting the signatures that you need, right? So the riding of Sault Ste. Marie, it doesn't include the First Nations. So I couldn't normally go to my family or friends. So because they weren't living in my riding, because they have to live in your riding. So I had to be very creative about how I got my signatures. And I literally stood out grocery stores and I said, hey, can you sign my papers? And some people were like, I don't vote. I was like, I don't care if you vote. I was like, I just sign my papers if you live in Sault Ste. Marie. I don't care if you vote for so-and-so. I just need your name on the paper and that's it. So it was just tiny goals, right? But so, and then after that, once my name was on the ballot, I was like, okay, this is real. Like, what do I do now? So I had a lot of support from people who have worked on campaigns elsewhere, and they've given me feedback and whatnot. And then I just decided to focus on local issues, right? So like, because what's going to differentiate me from a big party is that I can say I want to focus on X, Y, and Z, and I can say this is what I'm going to do from day one, and that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, parties, and especially when campaigns start, they want candidates to stay in really tight message boxes because they don't want to create distractions from like the overall campaign and from the leader. And that's a good point that you mentioned that, because what ended up happening in my campaign was, once I started talking, the other candidates started to take my talking points. And then once I started talking about the opiate issue, a major party had released a policy statement on the opiate issue, literally like a week later. And I was just like, you could have had me, like people could have had me, but whatever, it's, as long as. Well, I mean, for me, I think that's like a major source of inspiration for anyone who might be listening and think like, okay, I don't want to run within the traditional party structure, but so I could run as an independent because there are a lot of issues that I really feel passionate about that need to be talked about. No one's talking about them. Like, you can push political parties to talk about things, in this way.
Yes, that's exactly the benefit of that, right? So I don't think people would have been saying, the opiate issue is a big issue, or releasing a platform on it, right? Or saying that we're going to commit X, Y, and Z to that.
But you force their hand. And it's not because that's like something they, should have been talking about anyways, but, because it's like transportation day in, Toronto, or, they want to talk about the cost of living in Brampton, or, whatever the leader and the campaign wants to talk about. like, and they want the local campaigns, the small campaigns to be on the same message, right? To push out that, and that consistency. But like, that's maybe not actually what people in Sault Ste. Marie or in Kingston or in, wherever are actually, that's not what matters to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was the huge benefit, because I was like, okay, like these are the issues that matter to me, because I know like the ins and outs of them, and people were talking to me about them. And I was like, okay, like this is it. Like, this is what we're running on.
So if there's someone that would want to run as an independent in a provincial election, what are three things that you would tell them that they either need to do, have to do, or should just know about?
Yes. So review obviously the requirements required for a candidate. In Ontario, Elections Ontario has really great guides, and literally those guides have been like my life-saving device. And they're super easy to read. So just take the time to read them, create checklists, create your own process, because you don't want to be inadvertently violating election law, which is a serious offense, right? Or financing law. So start from there. And then if you're going to run, and once your name is on the ballot, you got to consider like social media and your communication. So for me, I didn't know that Facebook political ads were a special type of ad that you needed approval for.
And it takes a long time.
Yeah. So I don't know if my tweets to Facebook sped up the process. But obviously I have a significant following. And so maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I have no idea. But I got approved. I think I started working on it about 2 days after I was put on the ballot. And then I was approved like maybe middle of the month. So about 2 weeks in.
Facebook also treats me as a political party.
You?
Yeah. Because I talk about social and political issues.
Right.
So I've had to go through the exact same steps.
Yeah. So, and
it's like a woman with an opinion. We're going to, and I'm not a political party. I just, am opinionated and, advocate for different things. And they've slapped that same. So they treat me like the Republican Party or the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party. They treat the way they treat you.
That's wild.
It is.
Yeah. So those things, communication, and just like nobody would have told me. And I was like, okay, I know Facebook is big in Sault Ste. Marie, surprisingly. So I was like, and people are like, you should have it on Twitter. And I'm like, no, you don't know. People in Sault Ste. Marie are not on Twitter. They're on Facebook. So you just need to know where your audience is.
Yeah.
And so think about it as like a marketing plan, if you will. So I also know that people in Sault Ste. Marie listen to the radio a lot. So I was like, okay, I'm going to just invest in some radio ads and get them out there. Like I there's a very low chance that I'll lose, not win, but you know what? I want to try, and I want to gain this experience. And then from there, you can build the issues that you want to talk about. So when I first started on my website, there was 3 issues of firearms, marginalized workers, and I can't remember the other one.
Victims of police violence.
Yeah, victims of police violence. And so, but when the media started coming to me, I wanted to make it less about me and more about the community. So obviously those are community issues as well. But I decided to focus on so I had developed like 3 pillars. So, and worked with a friend on those. So there was listening and learning, health and well-being, and accountability and justice. So listening and learning was, in the first 90 days, I'm going to identify, engage, and consult with stakeholders on the opioid issue. I'm going to set up quarterly roundtables for the community. And I'm going to engage in media, like build better relationships with media. So just because, monthly updates, right? The health and well-being, that was, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but, and then the that was very community oriented as well. That had to do with like identifying emergency pathways to solve the opiate issue. So like how do we get everybody together to just solve this issue? Accountability and justice was focusing on victims of crime, increasing legal aid, so advocating for increasing funding for defense counsel, which as I am a defense counsel, there's a significant pay cut when you're defending legal aid clients. And then advocating for victims of domestic violence in rural and northern regions. So domestic violence victims have unique experience from those in an urban center. And I think the firearms issue is a prime example of that. So the research shows, and advocacy organization shows and tells and says, the victims of domestic violence in rural and northern regions are most like it's shotguns, right? It's not handguns. And even the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police says the tool of choice, quote unquote, not my words, weapon of choice is a shotgun in a northern and rural region, and that makes logical sense, right? Because in a new
hunting,
yes, so. And so when we talk about handguns and banning handguns, that's a very urban centric situation. And yes, that's an important issue, but let's have the reality check here that northern and rural domestic violence victims are literally in the home with the quote unquote weapon of choice. And, you know, the handgun issue is less of you know, it's very urban city centric, right? So it's very, it erases like the reality of those victims.
Yeah well, because a hunting rifle would be something that you have in your home 365 days a year, right? Not something that would only be there occasionally. Yes. Or that you would go out and purchase, you know, for a one-off, because you're probably hunting, you know, regularly.
Yeah. Or
not and I believe you actually have your firearms license.
I do. And
I read.
Yes, I do. I'm really happy that I got it because it helps me with my law practice. Also just advising, you know, individuals who may have received charges and then are like, how do I get my guns back? Like it's done. I'm done with it. I'm like, yeah, okay. And so it's been really helpful that way. And I am a firearms owner, and I find that it builds my own confidence to be able to trust myself and to respect other people's safety and to help teach that community safety aspect.
Again, like any political party that didn't like, it's such a missed opportunity for you. Like you're just, I mean, anyways, it's very frustrating for me to observe, you know, the system not working for you when it should be. But I'll just keep being angry about that all the time.
Well, I guess the system is working, right? Indigenous women weren't supposed to be there. Indigenous people are not supposed to be there. So the system's working exactly.
Well, it is. And that's why like it needs to change. Like it just absolutely has to change. You're right. The system was not built for you. It wasn't built for me. It was built for white men. And
exactly.
They are doing everything they can to ensure that continues.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting. I saw that there was an article from the Ontario Bar Association with the title, like part of the title was, "This is what a lawyer looks like, Naomi Sayers." And I love that because I feel like it through Madam, like the first design I did for Madam Premier was like a woman's place is in politics, in, you know, council chambers, the legend, blah, blah, blah. I might actually have "this is what a politician looks like" on a list in my phone as a possible like design. But I thought that was like when there's something that like says that, like to you, does that, thinking about it, like this is when you tell people like I'm a lawyer and, you know, I do all of these different things, all of these amazing things, like how does it, and does it start conversations with people about around their potential and their capacity And does it change narratives in any way?
So, when I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, I left, and I don't think if I didn't leave, I don't think I would be where I am today, because I was in a different. I was much younger, partying way too much drugs and alcohol. And, so to move back home and to be a lawyer, a lot of people, commend me for that. So I think people are open up to the idea that, people can change and people can, use their life experiences to help other people. So I think that narrative is important as well, because oftentimes, like, with cancel culture, like, we often think, because somebody did something bad, they're out, they're done, they should never come back. I think, obviously time and space away is important, but obviously time and space to come back is equally important. So I think that is an important discussion and narrative that is out there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, having conversations around, like cancel culture and, someone being quote unquote canceled, like, what happens to that person? And are we like relegating them to being angry and pissed off with, the world, and like pushing them further into where, instead of finding that learning, like that ability to bring them in?
Mm-hmm.
I wish we could have more. I wish there were more conversations around this, because I think I mean, first of all, you can't have these conversations on Twitter.
No.
A, because of the character limit, and B, because people are so willing to make snap judgments and to take things out of context. But like, we have to give people the opportunity to change.
Agreed. So yeah, that narrative is important. And then, I don't know, when I grew up, I didn't know what a lawyer was. All I knew what a lawyer did when I got in trouble with the law. So that was my only interaction with lawyers. And, obviously that's not a very good interaction to have. But I did have some good lawyers, and they've, definitely influenced my life a lot. So did I know what a lawyer did? Did I always want to become a lawyer? I think when I was younger, I said I wanted to be a lawyer, but I only said it because my sister wanted to be a lawyer. I had no idea what a lawyer did. So I think now when I talk to other young Indigenous women or young Indigenous folks, like even my nephew, like he's talking about my political campaign, and he talks about it in class and talk about it in school. Like, that's like a positive influence, right? So I don't know how they're talking about it, but I hope that they're just having conversations that are like, what, like, like, it's a local person, and it's an Indigenous woman, and she stepped up. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any opportunity for kids in particular to be talking about like politics and the political system, and then also to make that personal connection and be like, my aunt, ran for office, or like, I don't know about you, but like, I didn't grow up in a home that was political at all. No one talked about politics. No one talked about like a lot of things that I wish I had known. Like really significant things. And so it's like the only reason I think I'm political is because I had a really great teacher in grade 5.
That's awesome.
And like, and I never even thought, like, no one talked to me about going to university, because I'm actually only the third person on my mom's side of the family who's actually graduated from university. Like, neither of my parents have a college education, like graduate. My mom didn't even go. My dad didn't finish. So like, yeah, like there just has to be more. If we haven't had it, we have to, and we're doing it, we have to, like, we're showing other people like that it can be done. And like, it's a flame, right, that gets lit.
Yeah. Yeah. And exact same thing for university. Like my sister went, my dad went, my mom went, but like, it's still foreign because like, um, it like there's all these rules and you don't know about them until it's too late. And but now that I'm a lawyer, I try to help people like to understand like, okay, if you want to appeal a grade, this is what you do. Or if you know, you need to get accommodations, this is what you do. Like all of that's law, like people don't know that. So I just try my best to help as much as I can.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I mean, I see that come across like the things that you share and like on social media, and we've never met, but obviously now that's like on my list of things I'd love to accomplish in life. But yeah, I think you're inspiring and touching more people than you know.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we're running almost out of time, but there's one last question. And it's like, so I told you about this before we started recording. And it was like, I want to find a way to like end every podcast in like a unique kind of way using Gairas. And how I built this as my inspiration for like a question that I can like ask everyone. And I wanted to ask everyone to start sharing like one thing that, or maybe it can be more, but like, what is your superpower? And I said, I know this can sound like a little bit cheesy, but I don't think we need to, it's so easy to find fault with ourselves and to focus on the negative, but I really want to focus on the positive. So like, what is and this can be something that either people know about or don't know about, but what is Naomi Sayers' superpower?
So I don't know how to put it into like a bite-sized word or like one word or two words even, but I really have a knack for like, you know, looking at big systems and being like, okay, here's where the issue is. Like, this is where we need to focus on. And I think the example is like the nomination, right? So like, it was so frustrating to be in that process and for everybody to be like, yes, we need more women candidates. And it's like, yes, but we need this form. It's really not sexy. Like, I know you guys want to just be like, yes, let's get one more women to the table, but listen, this form, we just need to focus on this form, right? So I have this knack for being taking big systems and being like, this is where the problem is. And if we solve this problem will probably impact and have a ripple effect down the line.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing superpower.
So I don't know how to put that into like as little words as possible, but I guess maybe like systems change fighter.
I would say one of my superpowers, well, so I'm going to give it a try and then I'll tell you if you feel okay. Like, so distilling complicated information into translating it into a way that people can easily understand.
Yes.
I think so I like to think that one of my superpowers is like being able to take, like I met a man in an elevator once and I was like, oh, tell me what you do. And he was like, oh, do you have 30 minutes? I was like, no. A, we're in an elevator, and B, like, if you can't explain to me what you do succinctly, then that's a huge problem. And this is probably affecting your life very greatly. And then he was like, so I really forced him to do it quickly. And then he still did it in a really long and complicated way. And I was like, oh, so you do this? And he was like, yes. And I was like, this is my superpower. I can take that and make it even shorter.
That's awesome.
From like a communication standpoint.
I love it.
But anyways, well, thank you for sharing that. I love that. You know, I think for anyone who hasn't met you or doesn't follow you on social media, you know, like this, you definitely should, because I'm excited to see what you do. And, you know, the way that you shake up Canadian politics and, you know, on the advocacy side, speaking out on, you know, on the law and issues that affect Indigenous women. And, you know, with co-counsel Charlie by your side, who I feel like I've seen grow from like, you know, pup to massive pup, seemingly, you know, over the pandemic. Like it's a pleasure to even get the opportunity to talk with you.
Yes, it's so nice to meet. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking part today. And yeah, we'll see each other online, I guess.
Yeah.
So thanks for today. So this has been another episode of Elected. Now that I'm back to hopefully doing this on a more regular basis and creating content more regularly and scheduling podcasts. So the next guest on Elected is going to be Senator Kim Pate, and we are going to be talking about her amazing use of social media, specifically TikTok, to talk about social justice issues and her work as a senator. So you can watch out for that episode coming soon. So thanks again, Naomi, and have a great day.
Yes, bye.